Well, welcome to another part of what is the engine drama saga fiasco here with the Land Rover Series 3. It was a couple of weeks ago that I bestowed upon you my point of reaching a width and the lack of it. And since then there has been some developments, and many of you have been fantastic with your comments, advice and support, so I very much appreciate that. But I thought I'd better let you know whether the Series 3 has been burnt, chucked down a mine shaft, or left to rust for all eternity. So that's what we're going to look at in this video. What could potentially be causing this vehicle to burn vast sums of oil? And we're not talking a litre or two, we're talking tens of litres, I should say. So anyway, if you want to find out more, as always, you know exactly what to do. Click on that subscribe button down below, click on that notification button too, but most importantly, stay tuned. So, where should I start? I will start there. That is very good, Jeffrey. This video is not going to come up with a definitive answer. Just a, spoiler alert there. I've had the odd comment before that, Geoff, you could have said that in 5 minutes. I do apologise, but I'm all about the facts, not the fiction, and outlining all the gritty details so you guys and girls can make up your own mind. But more importantly, if someone, and I wouldn't wish it upon anyone, whoever you are, has this same problem and woes, they can watch this video and go, I've got that same problem, Geoff has told me what it is, they're the symptoms, I can go and fix it by watching a simple 10, 15, maybe 20-minute video. That's pretty easy, and you'll appreciate that more as the video goes on. So after the point of reaching my wit's end, I did what any Land Rover owner does and shut the shed door and went and worked on another Land Rover, because that's why you own more than one. You've got to share the love, But I did a lot of soul searching, you could say, and I basically called anyone that I knew who had some experience with these engines and who has done a little bit of engine reconditioning, restoration work in the past. And I also reached out to Turner Engineering in the UK, which is quite a prestigious company that's made a name for itself for bringing these motors back to life. And a good friend of ours and a supporter of Seriously Series, Adam, and thanks Adam for helping us through this, actually suggested another company which I believe is Glencoe Land Rover in the UK. Probably got that wrong, but you can correct us, Adam, please do. So both the gentlemen that work there are named Richard, so they must be pretty good, and they have been very helpful. I've also had a good chat to a few other friends of mine who are currently finishing off rebuilding these motors and have done a couple themselves, and sort of what are the pitfalls that can go wrong with these engines. And the biggest problem with these motors is the fact that they are, and it sounds really silly, so simple. So if anything does go wrong, it has to be either put together incorrectly, or it has to be some significant major failure of some kind. So anyway, I was a bit dubious about taking the motor apart, so I didn't want to just go and start ripping things apart and having nuts and bolts flying all over the workshop. So what I did is I did a number of tests. So I did a compression test and I did a leak down test. And many of you will be familiar with compression tests, and basically it tests the compression that can be held within the motor, and you do that with the throttle on full noise basically, and the reason why you do that is so pressure doesn't build up in that part of the engine basically, and it gives you an idea of the health of the motor. Leak down test is a bit different because you're actually injecting air into the cylinder itself and seeing how long it can actually hold the air in that cylinder. Basically, to cut a lot of waffle short, all the results came back bad. Really bad. Not like, down by 20%, down by 30%. Down by 50 or 60 was probably more in the ballpark. So how on earth, in the words of Damon, was this thing running is a testament to the engineering that went behind it, which is also potentially maybe the downfall of why the motors failed. Who knows? So anyway, that really didn't tell me much. It did tell me one little thing though, that there was air getting or compression escaping from cylinder 1 to 2 and 3 to 4, and that generally indicates that there's usually a head problem, head gasket or cracked head. So anyway, after doing all that, I thought enough's enough, let's pull the motor out. So I pulled the motor out a week ago. Then a good friend of mine, Ryan, found an engine stand for me to borrow and hopefully now purchase. And the engine, as you see here, is in its happy state of doing nothing. As Mike, a good friend of ours, pointed out, they are a stationary engine, some of them. And it's not because they were designed to work in one spot, it's the fact they don't do anything. And this is one of them. So anyway, I took the sump off, had a look at that. The oil was obviously, or what oil was in there, was jet black. I then wiped my finger along the bottom of the sump, and there was like this, it almost felt metallic, but rubbing it in between my finger, or index finger and thumb, it would slowly break down into sort of more like a powdery paste. And this was obviously carbon buildup from within the cylinders, but also in and around the inlet and exhaust valve. So that wasn't really a good sign. So the next point of call or point of interest was taking the cylinder head off. And when I took the cylinder head off, and I'll give you a couple shots here close up, shock horror, I bet you can guess what happened. The head gasket was gone. Completely and utterly just, I can't even say the word. It was so shocking to see. It was just non-existent between 3 and 4. It was just basically it was like when you fry an egg and you forget that you left it on the stove, or the Barbie, for that matter, the Barbie plate. It was just nothing. It was just charred cinders. So that was useless. Cylinder 1 and 2 wasn't a bit better, but not great. And for some reason, the cylinder head, prior to this, and sorry I'm jumping around a bit here, prior to taking the cylinder head off, I actually did double check all the torque settings. And somehow the bolts were all half a turn to 1 turn loose. Now whether that's my torque wrench being off by a mile, or it's the fact that the cylinder head has heated up and contracted and moved and warped, I don't know. But it does seem to be quite excessive. Was that the cause of what, led to the cylinder head or the head gasket failing? Who knows? It's definitely a whodunit mystery, this. So anyway, I took that off. So that's probably where the compression was getting lost. I'm saying probably because I don't know what's right or wrong anymore or what's up and down. So anyway, I did that. Now, one of the things that a good friend of mine, Tony, pointed out, and another good friend of mine, George, kind of alluded to, was that the conrods in these motors can actually be put in the wrong way round. And with the conrod, and I've got one here, I actually have on one side a tiny, you probably can't quite see it, a tiny little hole. And on the other side, they have nothing. Now, that little hole there is basically like a jet, and that actually flicks oil up onto the thrust side of the bore as the cylinder's going up. If that's round the wrong way, then obviously the cylinders aren't going to get lubricated adequately. And that little gallery should be pointing towards the camshaft side. And when I pulled the motor apart, I forgot that I had it upside down. And so I thought, yep, conrods are in the wrong way. Turned it up the other way, and I was like, no, they're not, Jeffrey. They're not. Naughty. So anyway, that wasn't the problem. So now I then went to looking towards the bores. How bad were the bores? And once again, a good friend of mine, Tony, popped around and had a look, and I'm so glad that he did. He found that halfway up on every single cylinder on either side of the bore, the thrust and probably what I'm going to call the downdraft side, or when it's returning down to BDC, there's a patch. And this patch is actually smooth. It's like a mirror on either side of the cylinder. Now, this would indicate, and Tony was right in what he said, that it wasn't bedded in correctly. But I don't know. Like I felt like that I did everything right to the page, to the book, to the paragraph, the sentence, and all the rest. But obviously not. So, is that the case? Is it the case that the rings weren't bedded in correctly? Is it the case that there's something funny going on within the bores and there's some kind of imperfection or lull in there? The other thing that we discussed was obviously how it was actually honed out. Now, these motors aren't exactly old, but they're not exactly new, and technology has moved on vastly in the last however many years, and tolerances are a lot finer. And one of the things that was mentioned was that if the bore is honed out too fine and too precise for these engines, which have huge tolerances, that could potentially be a problem for the rings actually bedding in. So it almost sounds like doing a slightly shottier job of honing it in, or a coarser hone, is actually more beneficial, because the cast iron rings and pistons, or cast iron rings I should say, would be able to bed in better. So it's still, questions are popping up left, right and centre for myself. I'm taking it one day at a time, but I think at this stage what I'll be looking at doing is honing out the block myself. Don't worry, we'll take you along on that journey, and getting a new set of rings to fit the pistons, and doing a few tests to see obviously what the ring gap is, and go from there. And in regards to bedding the rings in, they're going to be bedded in well and truly. I'll put the number 5 trailer on it, I'll put a couple ton of rocks behind that and just chain it to it and find the biggest hill I can and just labour up it, labour down it and all over the joint, and do that for 5,000 miles, and if it isn't bedded in by then who knows. I'll probably end up with a 109 inch because it would have stretched the chassis so much, but who cares, as long as the rings are bedded in. It's funny because there's actually a documentary about rings in Land Rovers, and it was about gods and how they're crazy, and I think there's a lot of truth in that. So anyway, thanks for sitting through the waffle. Thank you, sitting, for the long-winded answer and update of where we are here today. But we'll keep you posted on what's going to happen next, and yeah, there's a lot of crossing of fingers. I really don't know if putting a new set of rings in is going to work. I'm sort of beyond the point of wanting to sort of suck it and see. I'm usually pretty game to give anything a go, but yeah, it would be nice to have a nice definitive answer as to what it could possibly be. But, you know, you can't win all the time. If you did that, you wouldn't learn anything. So anyway, I'll let you be. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for participating with your comments. Thumbs up, like, support on Patreon and all the rest. It does make a big difference to these videos, as you can see. Proceeds will be going to a new set of rings and more. So anyway, if you're new to the channel, then please click on that subscribe button down below. Please click on that notification button too. If you thought this video was pretty tolerable and not half bad, give us a thumbs up, and look, we can use all the support we can get on Patreon. So thank you, and I hope to see you in our next video. Catch you then.